Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. So today on the podcast, I have got Sam Clarke with me, who is the Chief Vehicle Officer at Gridserve. He's also the previous Chief Executive of Gnewt, which was founded in 2009. And he's also the Finance Director of the EV Café. And you know that I love the EV Café. So Sam, thank you very much for joining me and welcome to the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's honestly, it's so exciting, and we did actually meet in person, didn't we, at the EV show a few weeks ago, which was really nice to meet all of you guys. So yes, so got you on here, fantastic. Got loads of questions for you. So starting off with, you founded Gnewt, which is a fully electric delivery fleet and zero emission delivery company, isn't it? And you founded it in 2009. How did you get to that point? What was it that kind of pushed you towards kind of putting something like that together?
Yeah, well, I've been involved in electric vehicles now for over 20 years, and actually, and as you intimated in the introduction, kindly, I'm somewhat of an entrepreneur, so I've had a few businesses in my life already. And the first one had nothing to do with EVs; it was actually selling Christmas trees on the side of the road in West London.
Love it.
Yeah, but whilst we sold a few hundred trees the first year, and 2 or 3 years later, it was the largest site in the country, so it did quite well. But as a result of that, I used to work 5 or 6 weeks a year, and by work I mean 20 hours a day for 5 or 6 weeks, so it was hard. But then I took the rest of the year off, and I would travel. So that was the grass is always greener. So that sounds great, but you can't do it forever. But I spent a lot of my time when I did travel in Asia. Particularly in China, and that's where the idea of electric vehicles came to me, or rather nearly ran me over, because I was an idiot tourist that looked the wrong way crossing the road one day, coming out of a trade fair where I'd spent all day looking for new business opportunities, had been presented with tens of thousands of things, and not one of them got my attention. And then as I crossed the road as I was leaving, this electric scooter went straight past me and nearly ran me over because I looked the wrong way. It's not their fault, it's mine. And thought, hang on, what was that? And then I realised, this is 2001, something like that. They're everywhere, in large conurbations in central China, well, all over China, particularly in the south, actually. There were tens of thousands of electric scooters buzzing around, but 20 years ago. But we didn't have that. I thought, well, that's, I love vehicles. My parents are previous racing drivers, so I've got that in my blood. And I just thought, this is it. This is the thing. It's environmental, which didn't necessarily mean as much. No, definitely didn't mean as much to me then as it does today. As now I'm older and I've got kids and all the rest of it. But I just saw it as a great opportunity, and that's where it was born, really. So my first business was trying to develop and design and import from China, from America, from Europe, electric motorbikes and scooters, which in early 2000s was far too early and didn't succeed because it was just they were too expensive, too unreliable, didn't go far enough. There's a few recessions ago now, but recession rolled into town, and it just didn't work. But the learnings that I created at that time, I think, had value, and that's what I took the learnings of that and decided to create a service business rather than a product business, and use electric vehicles in a service environment by virtue of a logistics company. And that's how Gnewt was born, which is an acronym for Green New Transport. So terrible name, no one could spell, no one could pronounce. But after a while, it became well known, at least in central London. Everyone knew what it was, So and it's easy to Google too, because we were on the first 12 pages of Google because it's an unusual word. So that almost by chance was useful. But so that's how it was born, and it was cargo cycles to begin with. It was small electric scooters and motorbikes and electric pedal bikes with huge boxes on the back, and that's how the business was born, and then diversified into electric vans very quickly. Became the largest fully electric fleet in the country. Had the largest privately owned infrastructure, the largest vehicle to grid network, and it just kept going and going. And the big boys caught up eventually, the DPDs and the Hermes of this world, or Every, as I think they're now used. And they were our clients, but now they've moved into electrification themselves. So, hopefully I helped to contribute a little bit to electrification of logistics. I think I was one of the first ones to do it on scale. And I'm delighted to see the big boys doing it as well now. I was sort of fighting against them a little bit in the early days. This new upstart, what is he doing? Taking our business in central London, but I was doing it, and they were talking about doing it. Whereas now they've caught up, and that's great. It's good. So I'm pleased for that. But it was a long old 10 years but we delivered 10 million parcels in 10 years of my tenure, which all by electric vehicle, which was
That's amazing.
which is all right, I suppose, for a startup.
It is. It is. I mean, you've definitely got that entrepreneurial flair, haven't you? So right. So when you first, the business that you said didn't go as well, how old were you when you first started that then? So when you were importing from China or even if it didn't work, you can't have been very old then, surely.
Early to mid-20s. Yeah.
Were you?
Yeah.
Crikey. So you always had that kind of entrepreneurial flair and sort of like thinking out, that innovation.
Sort of. I think part of me didn't know what I wanted to do, much to my dad's annoyance. So I went to university and got a business degree on the basis that's probably a good idea, but didn't really know what I was going to do with it.
Right.
And indeed spent most of the time playing rugby instead of studying anyway. But I managed to get through it. And actually, I'm not an academic, so I managed to get through at least with something. So I got a 2-1 in the end.
Cool.
And I think, yes. And then left uni going, I don't know what to do next. So I scrabbled around for a little bit, and I love rugby, so I went and worked with England Rugby in Twickenham, and a mate of mine just had this idea of these Christmas trees, and then I sort of embellished on it and thought, well, we could do that, but why don't we do this, and I sort of fell into entrepreneurialism really just by selling Christmas trees in a caravan on the side of the road at one of Twickenham Stadium's car parks, and that was just wonderful, really. I still look back on those days with great fondness. It was brutal. I mean, honestly, it was brutal. 20 hours a day, lugging trees, selling trees, hiring stuff. But it was lemonade stand logic. It's sort of we had to hire all this stuff with no money, all on credit cards, and we borrowed the land from the local landlord and promised that if we made any money, we'd give some to charity. You can have the money and you can say that you did it. All that sort of negotiations of just trying to make, and it's a lovely story in a way because it's just raw entrepreneurialism with no money and no women a prayer, but just loads of risk, but just nothing more than brute force and ignorance to get it through its first year. But you have to have that sort of fire in your belly to when every single thing gets thrown at you. I mean, we put these huge signs up and then we got told by the council to take them down. Straight away we had to work out another way of doing it. You just come up with all of these challenges and just fight through it somehow and get through it. And I think that's what gave me the spark. And I know I can do this now. So what do I do next? But I didn't know what that next was, which is why I went and travelled and went to China and tried to see what the next big thing was. And I felt it was electrification of vehicles. Was 20 years ago. I thought I am pretty sure on the basis of what China's already doing, this is going to be big. What I didn't realise is it was going to take 20 years of my life to get to the point where the general consensus was this is going to be big. But
my God.
I would have quite liked to have taken up a little bit faster than this, but at least I've got the experience now.
I was going to say nobody can say that you don't know your stuff now. If you've been in this business for 20 years, you definitely know your stuff, don't you? You know the industry, the people, you know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, hopefully. I mean, I don't know everything by any stretch of the imagination, but experience has carried me a long way now, I suppose. And my dad said to me a few years ago, "You'll be amazed how many people you now know that you don't know you know." Which in its own right is quite nice because it means that in the EV Café, there's 5 of us that are very knowledgeable, but we don't know everything, but we almost certainly know someone that does with very little efforts because we all know so many people now in this industry that that also carries a lot of value, I think, now in terms of what I do with my career is those contacts, will hopefully hold me in good stead forever, because Absolutely. I've been in it a long time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So moving away from Gnewt then, what made you kind of move into Gridserve? What was it that kind of attracted you to Gridserve? What was it that they were doing that made you kind of go, right, you guys have got the same way, same kind of on the same wavelength as me?
Yeah, I think there was a period of time where there was a degree of overlap. So I knew that I'd sold my company, but I was still in it for a period of time. So I had an exit. And so during that middle ground where I knew that at some point, I knew when the point was that my tenure at Gnewt was going to end because I'd sold it and I was just representing it. Then obviously your brain thinks, well, what am I going to do next? And I had a number of different advisory roles for a while, and one of those was a board advisory role for Gridserve, because
Okay.
Toddington Harper, the CEO, is a talismanic, amazing man, really, that had this huge vision. And I'd known him for 20 years as well. We'd started
Oh, wow.
he was down the fuel cell route at that point in time, but we met very, very early in both our journeys, and then went like that into different directions. But we remember the conversation. We met, at their offices in Ivo all those years ago, and then we re-met a few years ago when I was presenting an event about infrastructure, and it was about the challenges that I had as a logistics company in places like central London, where the networks weren't fit for my purpose. They weren't designed for my purpose, but I was just doing a presentation around where the gaps were, where do we need to. And meanwhile, Todd, who was the founder of Gridserve, was in the audience listening to me talk about the things which he wanted to resolve. And so we re-met effectively at this event, Everything EV event, I think it was, for an inaugural event in London a few years ago. And then we just met during the network, and we caught up, and I recognised the fact this guy. I remember him saying he's going all in. He used his hands like this. He said, "I'm going all in again. I've sold my company as well, and I'm going. This is my next journey, and I'm going 100%." And I admired that, and I recognised that he meant it. He's the sort of person that wasn't just talking about it; he was going to do it. And so I was drawn immediately to the fact that, well, I'd covered electric vehicles before in terms of trying to build them and sell them. I'd done stuff around using them as a service business, and infrastructure. We all talk about it now, that infrastructure is the big thing that needs resolving, but I sort of recognised that 5 or maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago at least, because I was so in it that I knew that was going to be the next thing that needed to be resolved, and so I saw that as an opportunity. As an entrepreneur, I thought, well, that's a great opportunity and somewhere I'd like to be. So I joined his team very early on when there were only a handful of us. I think there's a couple of hundred now. But I just recognised, my gut instinct told me that this was something that I could really get my teeth into. I've got good experience in it, and the guy that was leading it was inspiring. So that's really why I joined. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. We've had an amazing couple of years. The business has grown exponentially. We're now one of the big boys in terms of charging infrastructure in the UK, from a standing start and having charged no one anywhere. We're now charging 130,000 people a month, and that's still going up. So we've done quite well in a short period of time, and we've only just scratched the surface. So that's very exciting to me, even though I'm, not saying this in a negative way, but I'm an employee now for the first time in my life.
I bet that was a different experience for you.
I'm part of a family that still treats itself as a startup, that just is doing things for the first time. We seem to be doing things for the first time all the time. That's exciting. As an entrepreneur, that's exciting to me, because we're always learning and we're making mistakes along the way. Of course we are, but it constantly keeps going forward. And for me, that's very exciting. One day's never the same as the next, so it's great.
So just explain. So for those that don't understand, don't know about Gridserve, will you just explain what Gridserve do, and also what you do in your role in Gridserve?
Sure. I mean, the thing that we're most well known for in the industry is charging infrastructure, but Gridserve actually does quite a lot more than that. We have this phrase we call sun to wheel, which is the play on the old well to wheel analogy of oil wells, oil refineries, transporting it, petrol stations, burning it in cars. We effectively do the same thing, except we call it sun to wheel. So rather than waiting 250 million years to dig up dead sunlight in oil, we're taking sunlight from the sky on day one, and we own and operate solar farms around the country that is harvesting sunlight straight out of the sky. It's a virtually infinite resource, and we're tapping into that. It's a renewable resource, of course. So that's our oil, is sunlight. Our oil refinery would be battery storage. So we own battery storage, a lot of batteries as well, which are often twinned with our solar farms, or battery hybrid solar farms. So we're using that energy for arbitrage. So we're trading with it, but also it's feeding into the grid, which is then being netted off with our charging infrastructure, the bit that people know us most for. So we've got public access infrastructure around the whole country. 85% of the service stations in the UK have Gridserve chargers on them. We're also building huge electric forecourts in places like Braintree and Norwich. We've already built. We're breaking ground now in Gatwick, and we've got a number of other ones that are being built next year.
And
then
really
the wheel bit, sun to wheel, we also have a leasing company. So we lease. We have a brokerage, so we broker deals for the end consumer, business or customer, or B2C and B2B, to sell vehicles or broker vehicles to lease on contract hire to the end user as well. So we're covering what we think is the entire journey from generation to distribution and consumption. So we're trying to be, the renewable story covers that entire footprint. But as I said, the bit that we're most well known for is the infrastructure in the middle, because that's the one that has the strongest brand, if you like, because it's there, everyone can see it and touch it and use it. So that's the bit that we're most well known for.
And what about your role then within the company?
Yeah, so my role, as you said at the beginning, is Chief Vehicle Officer, which is a title that Todd and I he very kindly invented, or we did together for my benefit. Not knowing quite what to call me, but my job description in a nutshell, and we came up with this in the same conversation, was electrification of the nation. Like, how do I help get as many people into EVs as possible, and by virtue of doing so, of course, use our infrastructure in the process. So I look at all sorts of things across the business, whether it be how our customers interact with our infrastructure, how do we get more fleets and more commercial entities into the mix. And I spent a lot of this year looking at very, very large scale commercial infrastructure for big trucks and coaches and vans and things like that as well. So at the moment, and also other things like roaming and how third party partners are going to interact with our network in the future. So I spend most of my time looking at how we can increase our utilization metrics, which is obviously a key metric for a charging infrastructure company like ours. And how do we do that? What tools do we need to bring more people to the network? And how do we need to build the network to make it bigger, to be able to facilitate this increase in demand as well? So that's largely what I look at. But I have that still have that privilege of being somewhat entrepreneurial and being able to come up with ideas and hopefully get it through board approval and then crack on and get on with stuff. That's part of my role, to be able to engineer those sorts of scenarios, and it's it fits me very well. So I'm very privileged to be in a position to be able to do that.
That's brilliant. So what would you say if you wanted to explain to anybody about those companies who wanted to move towards electric fleets? What are the benefits of moving towards an electric fleet?
Well, the environmental benefits are fairly obvious. Depending on the fleet size that you have, there's a very good chance that there's some low hanging fruit in every fleet that says, well, actually, those vehicles could be electric today. So it's very much the case that we're going to have to do this. It's not just because it's environmental and it's the right thing to do, but there are mandates and government regulations coming not that long away now that will force us to do it because it's the right thing to do. Exactly. So now is very much the time to start to get into the motion of how do we start to transition into EV, so that there isn't a frightening event that happens in 2030 where suddenly we can't get diesel or petrol vehicles anymore, that actually the transition has been completed. And we can't wait till 2030 anyway, because as you very well know, more than most people, based on your family's background that you told me about, the IPCC reports tell us that we've got to get on with it. We've got hundreds of days now, not thousands, to sort it out. So everyone has to pull their weight, do little things to make big differences, and so fleet electrification is going to be needed. It's going to be part of tender processing for big contracts. It already is. It was already the case in my old business that there were tick boxes which mercifully I'd already ticked very much by being completely electric. But you could see other companies thinking, well, they're going to struggle with those tick boxes because they're not electrified yet, and they're going to need to be. So there's a carrot and stick element of all of this, and it's not always easy. I had a fleet of over 100 vehicles that were plugged on 3-pin sockets on walls in archways in central London. It wasn't easy, and we balanced things in a very dumb, smart way until such time as we got into the ability of being able to be smart in the way that we did it. But hopefully I'm a walking case that says, well, no matter what challenges you've got in front of you, it is doable, even on a small scale, and you can build it up. I just did it warts and all straight off the bat, but on a blank canvas and just threw everything at it. But a lot of companies are going to have to make a transition, which is possibly harder. But I've got a good friend of mine that I work with at Menzies, who bought my company, who now who acquired another logistics company in Scotland, and we knew, again, we've known each other for 20 years. As Highlands and Islands is not an easy place to electrify, but he's got 8 to 10 vehicles ready. He's finding his lowest hanging fruit and he's going for it. And that's fantastic. And it might take him a long while to be able to electrify everything, because the Highlands and Islands is incredibly challenging to electrify. But he's doing it already, and if he can do it up there and I can do it in central London, then people can do it everywhere. It just needs a little bit of understanding of the market, a little bit of hopefully listening to people like me or the EV Café or Gridserve or whoever it is that have a bit of knowledge, and what does your footprint look like, and then how do we electrify that, because everyone's story is different, but everyone can do it for sure.
And what would you say, what are your main concerns about the EV infrastructure?
Main
I
concerns
know
about
I'm
EV
going to dig in
infrastructure.
there, aren't I?
Yeah, there you go. You're starting to dig
We
now.
get to the meat now. We get to the meaty
Yeah.
bit.
Well, I mean, there's been two anxieties that have plagued our industry for years. It's range anxiety and charge anxiety. And range
Yes.
anxiety is diminishing day by day as the vehicles are getting better, they're traveling further, and people are more confident in the fact that they will do the range they want them to do. But charge anxiety, sorry, remains. It's the key word is, oh, what about the charging infrastructure? And
Yes.
rightly so, because it isn't good enough yet. But it will be, and it's growing all of the time, whether it be Gridserve or Osprey or Instavolt or whoever it is that are building more and more infrastructure day by day and doing a damn good job at it. And we are getting there. And there is a bit of a chicken and egg scenario here, because it's not easy to putting charges in the ground is easy. Finding enough power or finding the right land and getting the power to them is not so easy. And that's the bits that people don't necessarily see or understand just yet. So it's taking some time to get the right power in the right places to be able to put the number of vehicle chargers that people need. But the demand is there now. You can see that, or we can see that already in the statistics I gave you earlier. The demand is there and it's not going anywhere. So we've raised an awful lot of money lately, and that is predicated on the fact that the maths say very clearly the demand is coming, and it's coming like a freight train at us, And so we've got to build stuff to facilitate that. But it isn't good enough yet. I've said this before a lot of times on the EV Café. There's an awful lot of pins on the Zap map when you look at it. All the different chargers. There's so many pins on the map. In fact, you can't see the country. But when you drill down to the ones that matter and take out the ones that don't work, it starts to thin out quite quickly. So there's an awful lot of pins on the map that I don't think should be there. I'd rather them not be there at all, rather than be there and broken. So I think there's a lot of legacy out there still that remains, which is reputationally damaging to the whole industry, as well as those companies in particular, which we need to remove. In addition, we need to put more chargers at more locations where it really is needed. So we don't put anything in the ground now if it's not more than 6 or 12 chargers. There's no point putting 1s and 2s here and there anymore, I don't think.
No.
Certainly in a high-powered sector, at least. We need banks of these things in the right places to be able to deliver the solution that people are going to feel comfortable that they can do that long journey. Most people travel 9 or 10 miles a week. That's it. But culturally, we want to be in a position that we do want to go up the country and travel 300 miles. We can do it.
Exactly.
Now, we've got to find a solution that puts people in a comfort zone that means that they can do that. If they only do that long journey twice a year, but they know that they can do it and the infrastructure is there to support it, then we've done it. But we're not quite. No one's there yet. There's an awful lot of work to do. But I think the next couple of years is going to be transformational as far as infrastructure is concerned. I know it is, because I know what we've got on our roadmap, and it's colossal. And if everybody else is doing the same thing, then we're going to see a big change over the next few years, which will put a lot more people in a more comfortable place. And hopefully during that same period, and we're seeing it already, is the capital unit cost of these vehicles is coming down.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing I'm always waxing lyrical about is the total cost of ownership model says that EVs are cheaper today, because when you take in your fuel and your lease, or you take in your electric and your lease, almost certainly an EV is already cheaper. But there is still this stigma, but the vehicle's more expensive, but it isn't. But it kind of is, it's sort of, we've got to go break that cycle a little bit.
Yes.
But if we can get cost parity with a petrol equivalent or diesel equivalent vehicle anyway in the next 3 or 4 years, then we get rid of that myth as well. We're constantly batting myths away, and again, it's getting easier now. Some of the silly ones of days of old of can you charge in the rain, are starting to disappear. The ones of where's the energy coming from is getting easier for people to understand now. But that sort of unit cost thing is still a bugbear of people. Yeah, they're too expensive. Well, probably aren't actually if you do the maths. But if we can get parity with a diesel or a petrol car equivalent, I think PwC says that's around 2027. So if we can start to get parity on the unit cost as well, then I think people will feel more comfortable generally about the cost of the vehicle and the cost of all the convenience and reliability of the infrastructure to support those vehicles as well.
And I remember when I saw you at the EV show, you did actually talk about bladder size as well, didn't you? Compared to charging, the length of time you could travel, because somebody said that to you, didn't they?
Yeah, it was not to me. They didn't. It was the the chairman of VW, I think, a few years ago. I don't know whether he's still in post or not. I can't remember his name. But I remembered what he said, and he said he was an older man, an older gent, and he said
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how far my vehicle travels because I've got a bladder range of 200 miles anyway. So what's more important now is the infrastructure to support the fact that when I get to my bladder range, I can charge conveniently and be on my way again. Exactly. So we don't need to create batteries that can do 500, 600, 700 miles. It's not necessary. If we've got 200 or maybe 300 miles, is probably a sweet spot. Certainly in a country like the UK where you can't really travel in any direction more than that without needing, and you should be stopping. You should, I've done one journey I've done one journey this year on purpose. I think it was I was way up north. I can't remember, Blackburn maybe. I can't remember. And I travelled all the way down to Norwich in one sitting.
My old hunting ground.
Yeah, and it took me 4.5 hours to do it, and I did it in one charge. And I did it just because I wanted to see whether it was doable. But I only did it once, and I would never do it again because you shouldn't be driving constantly for 4.5 hours.
Absolutely.
I travelled 300 miles, and I got there, and I thought, wow, that was that's impressive. As in the car's impressive. But realistically, you should be stopping and having a break, And if you get to the point where you can bang in a couple of 100 miles range in 20 minutes, which is comfortably enough time to get a sandwich, get a coffee, or just go in and have a wee and come out again, and have it, just give yourself a little bit of a break, then we're not inconveniencing ourselves. And I've spent years driving around and charging vehicles, frankly, if I'm honest, inconveniently, because it's taking me ages or the charging is slow or whatever. But I've been building this window of time into my life for so long that when I stop, I'm doing 50 emails, I'm doing 3 or 4 phone calls, I'm having lunch, I'm making sure that I've without thinking it, I make my life now into making time to make sure that it's not just charging. I'm not sat there twiddling my thumbs. I'm killing 2 or 3 birds with one stone whilst I'm charging. So charging becomes secondary. But now it's getting to the point where I'm running out of time. I'm charging so quickly that I'm all those things. I haven't got enough time to do all those phone calls, all those emails anymore because the car's charged and I got to get on. Which is meaning the headache isn't becoming a headache. It's becoming something where it's just a splash and dash, or we can't use that phrase anymore, can we? A bolt and bolt. Something like that.
Yeah,
it needs to be where it's so we're getting to the point now where 20 minutes is not really an inconvenience, and you can get a meaningful amount of energy in that time.
Exactly.
So the bladder range thing, I think, therefore, is a play on the fact that if we can get the infrastructure right, everything else will sort itself out.
So the one thing that I've been learning about lately, and I'm not sure I mentioned this before we started recording, about greenwashing, and actually I understand it more now, but I'm assuming that if I didn't understand it until I looked into it, other people would be in the same boat. So can you just kind of high level give us an explanation about what you see as greenwashing? What is it?
Well, I think we've got to be very careful that we do what we say. Or do what we say we're going to do, and also make sure that that where we've done things, we talk about the fact that we've achieved something in the environmental space and it's material. What we've got to be very careful of is the rhetoric that is often marketed in the industry or industries around talking about doing something but never actually delivering it. And therefore you're giving yourself the perception and the reputational positiveness of achieving something that you haven't actually done. And therefore there's a fine line, because you can say something one day and people say, oh, that's brilliant, well done you, and then you never actually deliver it. But then you've given yourself, you built yourself up this reputation of being something that just hasn't manifested itself. And we can ill afford to do that, especially in our industry and globally, and because of the climate crisis is real, and we've got to do things which are material and you can prove that you've done. So one thing I've often said over the years is I would far rather do something and talk about it than talk about doing something, because they're two very different things, but they could be perceived to be the same. And I think that's a dangerous game. So I'm very proud of, as I've explained to you already, the things I've already done that I can hang my hat on, and I've earned my stripes, And Gridserve, has materially done things. You can see it, you can feel it, you can touch it, you can use it. You can go to any service station in the country, more or less, and you can see things that we've put in the ground this year. I'm very proud of that, because it means that we're demonstrating that we've delivered the things we would say we were going to do in a very, very short period of time as well, I hasten to add. So we said we were going to do something, and we've done it very, very quickly. And what I don't want to see the industry fall into the trap of is greenwashing, this sort of, oh yeah, we're going to do this, and it's going to be amazing, and then it never manifests itself. That's a dangerous game, and I think we've got to make sure. And I perhaps are in a privilege of having this auditorium to speak out through the EV Cafe or through Gridserve or through my previous businesses to say, well, I've been there and I've done it, and I can show that I've done it, and now I think you should do it too. So don't talk about it, do it, and then talk about it, because that way, you get so much more reputational positivity out of being able to prove the things that you've done and shout about it once you've done it. And I fear there is a growing greenwashing element of let's just talk about it for a bit and then we can kick the can down the road. We can't kick the can down the road anymore. There is no time to do that. So I'm sort of a position where I've got to be careful what I say in public because I represent a brand now that isn't mine. It's shared amongst us all, so I have to be careful. But at the same time, I do want to call people out sometimes and go, well, did you do that thing that you said you were going to do 2 years ago? You were going to build and you haven't built it yet. So where is it and why haven't you done it? You took all the plaudits for it, but you haven't done it. So what's going on there, guys? Come on, crack on. So I think we've got to challenge people to make sure that we don't greenwash our way to oblivion. It needs to be material change, material things, and be proud of the things that you've built and know that it's making a meaningful difference. The mantra we've got at Gridserve, our strap line is to deliver sustainable energy and move the needle on climate change. We want to be able to move that needle. We can't move the whole thing, can't do it on our own. We need many hands to do light work. So we will do as much as we can to give that needle a nudge or a push. But everyone's got to do something material to push that needle to the point where we're no longer 1.5 degrees is no longer a number that's being discussed.
I know.
But at the moment it is, and it's a frightening number. And everyone should be frightened about it because. I've got kids now. It matters to me so much more, as I said at the beginning. I saw this environmental EV thing as a mechanism by which to make money.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people see that as a mechanism to make money, especially now because it's such a growing market. But what matters equally, and now I'm a bit older with kids, is that I want to leave this planet in a better place than I found it. We
Absolutely.
are the first generation to recognise climate change and the last one to be able to do anything about it. I've stolen those words from Mr. Attenborough himself, but they're important words and it means something. And we've got to make sure that we are doing things that actually make a difference, not greenwashing our way to marketing short-term reputational benefit. That's not acceptable to me.
So if you could wave a magic wand to improve all of this, would governance, would that come into play in order to actually make sure that that these organisations couldn't, they had to follow through with what they said they were going to do? Would governance play a part of it? If you were able to kind of say, today I can control everything and therefore this is what I want it to look like, what would yours look like? What would your future look like?
I think there's possibly a little bit more stick that could be applied. Certainly in the case of people that state they're going to do something but then don't go through with doing it, or it takes them 10, 20 years rather than the 3 or 4 they said they were going to do it in. So I think there could be a little bit more governance around that. I think is in Australia. I think if you put an offer in for a house, then you've got to commit to it.
Yeah.
Whereas over here you can chuck any number into anybody and it's not, you've got no commitment. So I think there might be an element of learnings from that in terms of, well, if that's the thing you've got permission to do and you said you're going to do it, then do it.
But prove it.
How that looks, I don't. It's a dangerous game to put too much governance on these things because we don't want to be in a tyrannical society that's being controlled by some higher power. The market forces need to drive their own decisions, but at the same time, I think if we don't have some degree of governance and leverage here in terms of forcing people to get on with it, then we're not going to reach the levels of environmental benefits that we have to achieve in order to get those critical numbers to where they need to be. So I think we do need to be fairly tough in these next few years to make sure people deliver.
Exactly, because it's about steering the ship, isn't it? Really, we need to steer ourselves in the right direction, not say that we're going to go over there. We are going to go over there, and we can prove that we've gone over there. We've not just said we're going to go in that direction.
Yeah, exactly that, and we've got to get the right education to the right people in government as well. We've had an awful lot of negative press around solar. In one of the prime ministers this year that called it paraphernalia and was wasting good agricultural land. And she couldn't. It's such a terrible statements. That It's not paraphernalia. It's not, they're not put on rich agricultural land. They're put on grade 3A, I think it is, low grade land where you can't grow produce.
Yeah.
There is. We did some work on the basis of those comments with government statistics. That we took it from government statistics and worked out that something like 0.1% of land in the UK is covered with solar. It's almost nothing, and 0.5% coverage of the country in solar would be sufficient to be able to power every vehicle of every type, of every size, forever.
Blimey.
So that we would have no dependency on oil whatsoever for all vehicles of all types in the whole country forever, with half a percent of the land mass being covered in solar alone. So that's the sort of maths that I would love to see getting through to government, who are often lobbied heavily by the oil companies, who and actually recognise the fact that the statistics need to get through to those right people, so they can make informed decisions about what rules and regulations come back through the system that will drive the positive change that we need to get to where we need to be environmentally. So so there's education, I think, in all places, in all directions, whether it be government or in the corporate world.
You'd think that person, we all know who that person was who said that, but you'd think that she wouldn't have actually said anything unless she actually had something to back that up, wouldn't you? I find that kind of really weird, but
Yeah, it worries me that there's whispers in the chambers that then manifest themselves in public statements in the House of Commons. You're thinking, which have and those comments can have tremendously profound effects on the wider economy and the wider markets, the sentiment for investors. If they hear these words, which are made fairly flippantly, they can have very, very serious implications for the wider industry. Similarly, good education, good awareness on the other side, and pushing it more, in a positive light, will have a positive effect. So yeah, these sort of odd comments here or there can be, depending on who says them, can be
detrimental.
Can be the difference between saving this planet or not.
Yeah.
Because it is those, what is it, that other expression, death by a thousand cuts, right? So there's lots of little things which can manifest themselves into a big problem, but similarly, we can do lots of little things incrementally in a positive way to make a big difference as well. So we've just got to get the rhetoric going in the right direction.
Exactly. It's, as I kind of said to you, my big thing is kind of Kaizen, which is for those of you watching, which is behind my head at the moment, which is small incremental changes, and I think that's what it's all about. So I totally get where you're coming from. Just tell me a little bit about how you met because I've spoken to a few of you from the EV Café, but how did you kind of become part of that group? Because can I say mouthpiece, the amount of information that you're kind of giving everybody is just amazing. It just and the actual the intensity between, you all get on so well. It just flows really, really well when you're talking. How did that come about?
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing, isn't it, really? I'm very, very privileged. Again, I've used that word a lot in this podcast, but I am privileged to be part of that group. I was the last one in of the five of us.
Oh, were you? Okay.
So I got in by my fingernails, but but yeah, Johnny Berry, who started it, we all joined. The group didn't take long to be the five of us, but I was the last one in. But it was Johnny's idea originally to set up something that created this mechanism by which to have a voice in the industry and share knowledge. Yeah. But what quickly became apparent was that the characters that he invited in not only knew each other quite well, but also were quite reasonably well known in the industry. But also we took a light touch to it. So there's a lot of events, as you well know. There's a lot of webinars out there. There's a lot of mechanisms to get information, but quite often they're quite stiff and structured and bullet pointed PowerPoint. Yeah. And there is a need for that, because it's a way of disseminating information. But we've done it in a slightly light-hearted fashion as well, just to give a little bit of a lighter touch to it. And we make mistakes, we fumble things, we wind each other up online and offline. But ultimately, there is a core secret source, which is our five personalities, a reasonable knowledge base, and an ability to reach the wider market, to get people in to talk about the things that we don't know very well. We did one on Christmas about mental health, and it was one of the most popular ones we've ever done. And we barely spoke about electric vehicles. we were just talking about mental health and mental awareness for a bit, because it touches everything, no matter what industry you're in. But we had a lady from Enterprise who was championing it from her business, and she was fantastic, and there were so many people responded to it both during the live event and afterwards. So yeah, it's become this, and lockdown was it's a positive thing that came out of a global pandemic for us, was the ability to create something when everyone was sat at home and learning this new world that we live in front of our screens at home. We were able to be somewhat of a mouthpiece, I suppose, to use your word, to talk about something that we knew about, but also do it in a way that was fun, and hopefully made people laugh occasionally.
Oh, you do.
Because why not, right? And it's just, life's too short. It's good to have some fun and wind each other up a bit in the process. So we try and keep that balance between general media incompetence, but also some degree of level of experience, personality, and reach and experience and knowledge that hopefully as a collective group, we've hit upon something. And originally we were all chucking a few quid in every month to pay for the Zoom subscription. Whereas now, we've got proper sponsors, and we go to events now, and we're invited to be at those events because they want the EV Café to be there, because it means that they'll get more people through the doors, which is phenomenal. It's, what an incredible thing to have been able to do and turn into a physical events as well. When we first met at the London EV show, that we were in the far corner of the event, but it was one of the busiest stands and was for every day. And it was because we had, EV Civils, the AA, Geotab, and Interval, who are 4 of our main 5 sponsors, were all there with us. And we were all pulling people together, and it was a community we created on one corner of the London EV show, and it worked. It worked as well in person as it did on a monthly call on a Wednesday lunchtime once a month in a virtual setting, which is lovely. It's lovely to be able to translate that into networking in real world and talking to real people like your good self. I wouldn't have probably met otherwise. So it's lovely to be able to bring it into the real world, as well as still hopefully make a difference in the digital one.
Oh, you definitely are. Like I say, I was kind of drawn to it. I don't even know. I think actually I saw other people talking about EV Café, and I kind of kept thinking, I'll just have a look at that. And actually, it's one of those. I don't think I often binge watch YouTube, but I was binge watching YouTube, just going, really, this is really, really interesting, So no, I'm not like my 17-year-old, he just binge watches everything on YouTube. But but it was you have just got this mechanism that works really, really well together, and your personalities, and it's just great, and the information you're getting out there. And like you said, I met a load of the sponsors, and they're just amazing. Just you've got the. It's the secret sauce, isn't it? Really, you've got this secret sauce that kind of works really well together.
Yeah, well, we've got some good knowledge, right? So we should, and we've all got different knowledge too, which is important. So we've all got different ways of looking at a similar industry. So why not share it? Why not share that with the wider? Because it's part of, we're all workaholics anyway. It's our hobbies are our work.
Yeah.
So we might as well use the stage that we've got to try and share knowledge. It's not doing us any harm, either. In terms of our own stature in the industry. We've got people coming up to us all the time now saying, "Hey, we've seen you on the EV Café." It's incredible. It's incredible that that's happened, and it's obviously helping our own brands that we represent as well. And long may it continue, I think, because it's we had someone messaged us just today on LinkedIn thanking the EV Café because it's changed his career entirely. He said he was moving into this space, wasn't quite sure what to do, heard about the EV Café, started joining it, started learning things, linked in with other people on the EV Café, and subsequently has now got a job as a result of it. So we've effectively changed someone's career in a positive way, or not. We haven't changed their career, but we've oiled their wheels, so to speak.
Exactly.
Another terrible analogy. I must think of a better one. But we've helped shape a direction for somebody almost unknowingly, and that's fantastic to hear. If we've done that once or twice a year, then it's worth it. So yeah, long may it continue, and hopefully we can still keep being positive and and helping people learn things, and we're learning as well all the time. Every day is a school day for us all, right? So
exactly. So every Friday at 10, you have your little news broadcast, don't you?
We do. We're hosted by our wonderful John Curtis, and then the rest of us join if we can.
Yeah,
And yeah, so that's a sort of 20-minute
it's a
splurge of
roundup,
information
really.
about what we've learned that week.
Yeah.
And because of the industry we live in, there was always something new to talk about because every week there's new news. There's loads of
Mm,
it, so we
mm,
use that as an opportunity just to have a little chat about what we've learned that week. Yeah, and then we've got the monthly one, which is an hour and a half normally, where we've got people on from. We've got usually a theme, and then usually some representatives from whatever theme of the industry, and we talk about that, and hopefully we all learn something.
yeah. Nice, good. It is really good. So, if people want to get hold of you, then Sam, is the best? Where would you say the best place was, or if they wanted to have a conversation, or if they wanted to kind of have a look at Gridserve, Can you remind me what the Gridserve website is?
It's gridserve.com, so that will send you into the Gridserve world, and if you're interested in solar or charging infrastructure or leasing a vehicle through us, then gridserve.com you'll find your way through the pathways naturally as a result of that. EV Café has its own website as well, of course, which is evcafe.org.
Yeah,
And myself, LinkedIn, as we've discussed before, is obviously a usual channel for many of us. So
yeah.
Gridserve, EV Cafe, myself are all easily findable on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, by all means, use any of the usual media channels. Just the keywords are my name or Gridserve or the EV Cafe, and you'll find us pretty quickly.
Thank you very much. Listen, it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you. I really appreciated it, and yeah, just to say thank you. We're a few days away from Christmas when we're recording this, so happy Christmas to you. I hope you have a fantastic time, and to everybody else, I'm going to say goodbye, and I shall see you all next time. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Liz. Merry Christmas to you too.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
You've been watching Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell icon, and you'll receive all of our weekly videos. Thanks for watching. See you soon.